All right, I got it on my phone. So, 6:02 PM, I'll call the meeting to order. And we can start with a roll call, please.
Christine Gator.
Here.
Jason Mellon.
Here.
Nick Redavid.
Here.
Nick Nodell.
Here.
Sarah Knack.
Here.
Trustee Gator.
Here.
Patti Garcia.
Here.
Don Rhoads.
Here.
Dennis Foster.
Here.
All right, thank you. We will go ahead and open it up to public comment. Being no public comment, we'll move on to our first action item. First action item is the minutes from the December meeting. Get those approved. Any changes or corrections?
Great, I'll make a motion to accept the December 18th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second. Second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Any abstentions? All right, that passes. And we'll move into the November 2023 Treasurer's Report and Financial Statements with our Finance Director and Treasurer, Don Rhoads.
Thank you. The report that's included in the packet is in October, November. So it's the third of our current series of monthly reports, hopefully getting a little better each time as we fine tune things and fix things up. Ultimately is to expand on this agenda memo, make it a little bit more of an executive statement. But I do provide a few thoughts in there that you can take a look at if you haven't already, but I'll kind of highlight them. In the revenues, kind of citywide, the general fund is ahead of target so far, mostly because of interest earnings and property taxes. Some of the funds, and overall, we're 80% for the whole city for all funds. A couple of the funds that are dragging down that percentage are the water and sewer fund, partly for reasons that we've talked about in the past, that we had a wet year and so revenues were left. But one of the big factors here you'll see in there is that included in revenues is proceeds from loans. And so for those two big planned projects that are happening, the timing of when proceeds from loans come can vary quite a bit. And so when you're talking about millions of dollars at a time, that if you look at those details there, you budget what you think is going to come in loans depending on what was spent that year. But in both those cases, it's less than a pure, say, 11 months into the year. You'd think it would be 92% or something like that. But the timing of loan payments doesn't always work out quite evenly. So that's partly what's dragging those percentages down. And just staying big picture here on the expenditure side, I guess the good news overall was that the operating budget is 85% spent. So that is, under what you might think of 92% being expenditures tend to work a little bit better, especially in the operations as far as monthly expenditures go. However, there are things in here such as debt service, which can be chunky up to the accounting firm as far as when it's spent, and other major expenditures. So those are generally under the one fund that I did point out was the Parks Fund through November were 97% expenditures. And so I looked into that and made a comment about it here in the report, but it turns out, and I went back and I studied the 2023 budget, but for some reason, there's about $250,000 in debt service in that fund, the Parks Fund, that somehow didn't get into the budget in 2023. But of course, we made the debt service payment, so that's doing those numbers a little bit. I think if you allow for that and put it in when debt service is backed out, the fund is more like 80% of budget, which is a good place to be. So wanted to point out a couple of those kind of big picture things, but I do appreciate this committee's help in making this a better report over the past few months, and hopefully we'll get to where it's improved enough that it's a pretty routine thing, and you know, we all can rely on the numbers in there, and I think we're getting there. But open to any questions you have about the member report, and we'll take notes, and if they need to be fixed, we can do that, and if we can explain it here, we will. If not, we'll certainly get an email out as soon as we can.
I did have a question, that's something you shared, you said loan proceeds are included in revenues. Is that standard to show that as a revenue?
In governmental accounting, I mean, it's not technically a revenue, it's like, it's an other financing source,
Right.
like the term that they use for it. So it acts like a revenue, so that's why it's included in the revenue section. But in an audited financial report, you'd have your revenue section, and you have a whole separate section that's called other financing sources.
Okay.
So in a monthly kind of format like this, where you're looking at budget and actual, it tends to skew things a little bit, because it's,
Right.
you know, the other option is we could just leave them out and only record, you know, pure revenues, but sometimes it's helpful just to have the full picture, so we let them in.
Well, I just wonder from a budgeting and then even like a review standpoint, if it wouldn't make sense to not, like, so we could see where we actually are. versus-
Yes. Certainly from a budgeting standpoint, we don't count that as,
Okay.
you know, as an operating revenue. And as far as seeing where we are, the detail report itself, you know, if you look at revenues, like in the sewer fund, let me find an example to consider water fund, same thing. Yeah, so you have a section for contributed capital, that's your impact fees, a section for operating revenues, and then a section for non-operating revenues. Non-operating revenues being things like loan proceeds and investment earnings. So if you want to zero in on just how are the operating revenues side of it going, like on page 17 of 122, that's the water revenues. You could focus in on, well, how did just the operations side of it go there? And that's, you know, we're 76% there, largely because of the water sales not coming in as high as we had hoped there. So it does take a little more of a drill down to get to that piece of it, but it is, the information is in there, just you have to drill down one more step.
Gotcha.
Are you, as far as the water fund and the tap fees and the raw water and what you did for the budget, how you separated it out? I don't know if you're doing that monthly, but it'd be nice to see that, track how it's going in each.
I'd say we're gonna start out with quarterly at least. We're gonna come back to our first quarter report that breaks that down. And just as kind of a side note, since we talked about impact fees, I spent an hour and a half in this meeting with Janice and our planning director. There are other impact fees we want to look at as well. I mean, we had information on the water impact fees and raw water fees, so that was highlighted during the budget, and we're going to do the same thing for the other impact fees, so we know what the balance is, the reserve balance is.
Fees and,
Yep.
yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yep, so the streets and other funds, so we do the same thing, though. It just takes a little bit more legwork, because we've come across an analysis of those that happened in the past, so we're gonna have to build that kind of from scratch. But that's a project for this spring.
And I was wondering if, these reports can be run on a cash basis.
Yes, good question. There has been some confusion on that. In theory, and we're working towards in practice, month to month, they should be on a cash basis. And I know that's been brought up, and so we're working to put steps in place to do that. Obviously, at year end, we go through a year end process where everything is, you know, you have accrued expenditures, and we gapify, if that's the word. We make everything generally accepted accounting principles so that we can do the year end audit reports and that sort of thing. But during the month, because the budget is largely a cash basis document, we strive to have these documents mirror that. And that hasn't been the practice in the past, so we're working towards that. In some cases, in fact, I think it's coming up in the next item, there was one question about, the expenditures in a previous month changing. Well, yeah, that's, and I think we explained it in there, but there are sometimes invoices will come in later. And our practice has been, in some cases, and it seems logical, but to charge that expense back to the month that the goods or services on an accrual sort of basis. But yeah, I think as you were highlighting, that kind of mixes accounting methods. So you've got some of it's cash basis, some of it's accrual basis. Now you don't know what you're dealing with. And so in order to get to a place to where you close out a month cleanly, which is what we're working towards, and that month then doesn't change, unless some really big thing comes up but a month shouldn't change after you close it. And so, maybe we'll keep reading that. So, that's what we're working towards, but, we haven't quite hit that target yet, but I think we're putting things in place in accounts payable so that, the idea being that if we get an invoice, we pay it that month. Even in the month of December, period 12, the month of December, it's cash basis initially until we go through the year-end process. We do a whole, period 13 thing where we do all of our accruals to make that month or the whole year, in fact, on the accrual basis. So, yeah, we're
Not there.
we're not quite there yet. Thanks for pointing that out. I think we are now.
Yes, for 2024.
Yeah.
So when you say we're not there, because QuickBooks can do cash versus accrual no matter when you put the invoice in. And I'm assuming Casel's so much better than QuickBooks. Can Casel not just run a cash basis based on what's paid that month versus because you can still put it in on the correct month, just to run the report differently? Can Casel not do that?
Not that I'm aware of.
So you actually have to put a September invoice in December if you pay in December, like date it for Casel. That has to be done that way. So it's an internal thing that you have to change. You have to change the way that people enter it.
That's what we're finding out. Yeah.
To do that. Being so robust of a system just doesn't do something simple like that.
You would think, and I didn't ask that specific question, so we can look into whether that's a possibility. To be honest, it's never come up to me before. So we've always been cash basis throughout the year, so it hasn't been really an issue. But QuickBooks is used much more widely than application like Excel. And so you'd be surprised there's some features that an application that's $79 or whatever it is might have features that an application that's private more than that doesn't have.
Okay.
So it's an easy fix. It's just a procedural thing.
Internal training. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're.
Because there's like $4 million difference in a capital fund item between October and November statements because it's accrual. So the invoice was entered before October, and now we never got to see what that $4 million expenditure was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's much more amplified when it's a capital project.
Yeah,
like that.
You're like, what's the $4 million?
Yeah,
We're missing $4 million.
right. Yeah, it's a procedural thing that I think we've got straight now, but
Okay.
it was, it was one that it makes sense when you think about it. Well, of course, we should put it for the month, but it's really when you think of it as cash basis during the year, and then accrual at the end, for year end, that makes a big difference.
So we're in November, these reports are November, so you're saying you didn't start it until January, so the December report will still be accrual and we'll still be missing things in between them.
November, and we could, in December, right? Yeah, November, December would still be, December is kind of gonna be an odd month because it's like, like next month, do we turn out the cash basis version of December or what's maybe hybrid cash and accrual, Or do we, let's see, yeah, it will all kind of depend on the timing of it. You know, we could just finish the accrual process and then turn out an accrual basis in December. Whether I can get that done by this time next month, I'm not sure, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, December would also be a hybrid
Okay.
cash and accrual, because we didn't focus on this until it got brought up, so. Yeah.
Well, accrual, which should show it accurately, but my understanding that they're putting in the earlier, they're not putting in the correct date, and so it's adjusting the
Well,
prior.
depends on how you look at it. I mean, it is technically, it's the correct date from, you know, when the goods and
Services were rendered.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example on those 4 million that you're talking about on the capital improvement projects. So we'll have the big construction payments that come in and we'll wire out the money, but the services in the GL period were back from September. So the invoice date is all still the same and the reconciliation on the exact month that we wired out the money is the same and it shows up on that refund. But when you go to print, say I wired it out in November, you go to print the November statement, the GL period is all the way back to, what did I say, September. So, and you're right, you're not seeing the detail, Christine, but, so when I came here in March, it was always told, always date it back to, especially those big construction payments, and especially around the month of December, we wanted to reflect, you know, when the services were actually rendered. So,
So different finance directors can have different approaches as well.
Yeah.
So that part of it is that with turnover, it could be changes or
and
confusion.
so now the discussion is when Angela enters in all the AP invoices, she's like, well, what? Because I've always directed her and told her, do it to the GL period that the services or products were received.
Yeah.
And no, I'm very competent in QuickBooks too. That's what I did my whole life before I came to Cassell. And you think, oh, it's so what?
Yeah.
No, it's not. You don't just push the cash to accrual button like you do in QuickBooks. I wish I could tell you, yes, it does all that, but it doesn't.
Okay.
So.
That's why the reports are in Times New Roman.
Right.
Yeah.
Gonna catch that.
Or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
I do have a question also. I'm, in my experience, the benefits and salaries will trail each other or be very close. But I'm noticing in this report, they're very different. And I'm not sure why that is. Just, I mean, one example, Public Works, whatever page that was, their benefits are 294%. And their salaries are, I forget, it was like 90%.
Yeah.
I would expect those to there might be a trailing floating because of benefit things, but shouldn't they be pretty close? Percentage wise?
Yes.
What page are you looking on
Well-
specifically?
Yeah,
294% and 89%.
Yeah. It's not the only one that has a difference, that's
Sure.
just the most.
I just saw that as I started flipping through.
Yeah. And if benefits are capturing other, like retirement event types, other things that are different,
Mhm.
then maybe that needs its own category versus being in benefits,
Comp?
right? Workers' comp. or-
So that elected officials have workers' comp in their benefit.
Yeah, no, workers'
it
comp
should
would be in there. Yeah, the question would be, why is the budget part of it so low? I mean, there was, I would have to look into that. There was so much, there was so much confusion over like the way,
The split.
the way things were split up for overhead purposes and all that. There might be something there, but I could look into why that. Yeah, you're correct. In a
Mhm.
perfect world, or even in sort of just an average world, the percentage spent for wages and salaries should be very similar to benefits. My guess is that this is more, that the budget number in there isn't quite I mean, that doesn't look like enough, 25,000 on 161,000 in wages and benefits, especially including workers' comp, because workers' comp, this is public works, there's,
Wow.
yeah, the workers' comp, it tends to be higher there.
That's what prompted, because if we need to re-budget the category because we got it wrong to start off with, then maybe that's a conversation, but the other, I don't think the amounts in all the
Yeah.
other categories add up to that difference. So
Yeah, that good point. Let's look into that one. And then I'll also look into how we handle it for 2024, because we tried to fix a lot of these quirks and
Yep.
discrepancies in 2024 that 2023 we're still suffering with a little bit. But let me look into that one. We can respond to that one a little more clearly, at least as to why that's 3 times the budget. I mean, that is not normal. You're right.
Just real quickly, looking at the benefits wages in our 2023 budget, the 25,000 was budgeted to the general fund. But then you have 43,000 budgeted to water, sewer, 15,000 to drainage, 36,000 to streets. So my guess is likely what happened is those numbers expenditures all got loaded under the general fund, but the budget lines were all in those other funds. I'm not saying that's the answer, but
That could be.
That sounds plausible.
the numbers look about right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, yeah, let's confirm that.
Yeah, if we got it, because that was the question I was gonna have tomorrow, so.
We'll confirm that one. Good question. Yeah, 2023 was not as, how it got, entered into Cassell and how the numbers managed was not as pristine as I would like to normally see. We tried to fix those in 2024. I'll check this one in particular. Make sure, but good question. We'll follow up on it.
thank you.
Oh, and then in the rec, salary and wages. If they're gonna go over budget, do you think it's just because we didn't budget enough for them, or did something happen in rec? This year that we weren't expecting?
This is
I'm not even on the page.
210, which page?
I'm not on there yet,
Oh.
sorry.
Okay.
I just saw it.
Okay, I see. Yeah, it's on recreation, so 210, so on page 28.
118%, we're in November.
Okay, so there were some, because if you look at it, it's the page just above for parks, they're at 76% through November, which is low, and they're over 118%. There was something, and I'll have to look it up again to remember, but the way a couple of positions were allocated affected these numbers some, and I'd have to look to see which ones they were, but there was supposed to be a division between a couple of positions so that it allocated appropriately to the parks part of that fund's budget, which is 210.34, versus the recreation side, which is 210.51. So I think between the two, it worked out. It's tight, but it worked out between the two. You're 31,000 over in recreation, you're 57,000 under in operating. So I think it's going to be tight, but yeah, I just can't remember exactly what position, but I can.
I can't remember either, but I remember the discussion.
Yeah.
And then the other question is, at the bottom of page 28, the total fund expenditures is at 97% for the park fund itself. Is that a separate line item that we, or is that part of the general fund when we submit whether something can go over?
This is fund 210, so parks fund, it's separate from the general fund.
It's separate, so then we need to make an amendment if it goes over?
We could, this is that case I mentioned earlier where if you look at the debt service accounts, 210, 90, 56, 30, and 32. The reason it's going over is because debt service was not budgeted in 2023. I mean, I looked it up. There's a line for it, principal and interest, and in the 23 column, it's just not there. So somehow that got missed.
Not just being entered, but missed in the whole.
In the whole budget process, yeah.
In the budget process.
What we
Yeah.
submitted to the county, so therefore, what do we need to do if we submitted it incorrectly?
Well, for 2023, the kind of the horse is out of the barn a little bit now on that. I mean, it's one of these cases where we had to pay the debt service, so it looks like we did. In a perfect world, we would go back and, you know, Patty, we can talk about that. We would go back and ask for a budget amendment for just that debt service piece for 2023. It seems a little after the fact now, but that would be, you know, that would be the,
Do we have to?
um,
Is it legally required? You don't have to do it.
So I guess the question is, what happens if this fund was submitted, then we're supposed to hit 100% of expenditures? If we go over that 100%, my understanding is we can move things around as long as this total number doesn't go
Yeah.
higher than what we submitted to the state. So if we submitted a number that's like 1.4 something
yeah.
for the fund and we end up spending over that, are we then required to?
So I would have to double check this, but I don't know that the state can tell. I mean, we have to submit the budget to the state, but I don't know that we're beholden to the state to, for this. It would be really more the board.
Okay.
You know, we could, for this, it would basically be a budget amendment if we wanted to do it, take that $247,000 from, you know, the ending balance of that fund.
Right.
And put it in the budget. I mean, it's a little bit of window dressing at this point, because I mean, the money is in the fund and the debt service was paid. I don't like that it's over like that, but through November, we're still under budget 39,000, but yeah, so it'll be December where it goes over, if it does, and it probably will. Operating expenditures are gonna be more than that, yeah.
So with parks, that's the majority of their expenditures are probably during the summer.
True.
Probably could pass some of that, so they may not have some December expenses.
So we'll look at December's report, and my guess is it's gonna be a little more than that 39,000, which would throw the number negative. I don't actually know whether it's I can't say I've run into a fund spending more than its total budget in my career that much. So it's unusual, because normally debt services is budgeted for. So
It's extra annoying because of all the rain.
Bingo.
annoying. It's that, yeah, so I mean,
Let's figure it out.
Patty,
now.
we can talk about it, because
Yep.
it's.
Figure out what the best
Yeah,
course
I mean,
of action is.
the cleanest thing would be to do a budget adjustment so that it's, you know, it comes
Mhm.
in. Okay, but, yeah, it depends on, I think, how much, concern the the board has with it, but. That's why it's over, that's why I pointed that out because it's, 97% in November is not good, but it's because of that. Otherwise, you're 87% for recreation and 74% for parks, so, you know, it's looking pretty good otherwise, but that piece of it just didn't get in the budget.
When I think about bottom line though, we're still in the black. We're still 18.5. But yeah, there's gonna be more revenues in December as well.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Oh, well, yeah.
Because they're outside of their peak operating.
I just think from the budget standpoint and what we have to submit, yeah, the expenditures may be more than they were budgeted for. If it works out that net revenue, the bottom line is still positive,
Yeah.
where
Yeah, 'cause
is there?
Yeah,
I just would be curious if there's actually a concern for
So-
county aid. that
Yeah,
type
the
of-
state says legally you can't spend more than what you commit to them. Without a budget amendment, but
So, I mean, we do have, it's a good point, we do have 147,000 and more revenues than was originally budgeted, so. We'll look at December and see how that looks, and it might need a little bit of cleanup action. Or maybe I'll scour the 2023 budget document a little bit more close. It's gotta be in there somewhere. A little frustrating because there's a line for it,
Mhm.
but that column, the numbers didn't get in the column. I'll take another look at that and then we'll see how December looks, but it might take a little bit of a cleanup action just to keep everything square for the state.
I think it's important that we recognize that.
Mhm.
I think my take, the good news is that we haven't spent more than.
Right. Yes, that is
They've
good
been
news.
taking it,
Yes.
whether or not that was necessarily budgeted. So.
Yeah, okay. Let me make a note of that too.
Any other questions or comments related to the November financials?
One thing I did want to highlight, to Nick's point earlier about the loans being mixed into the revenues, the one thing that does kind of mess with is because capital expenditures are completely separated out elsewhere in the loan expenditures. I think in all cases are dealing with capital, is you end up showing the net revenues, like in the water fund, of 10 million in net revenues over expenditures, but then in reality, that number is actually not, because those are going to pay CIPs that show up later in the report.
Oh, they don't come in until December, right? The transfer?
No, it's that the CIP expenses for the water fund aren't gonna show up in the water fund portion up here, but the loan proceeds.
They do eventually, yeah. So
Okay, so they will,
at the end of the year, so this is one I've kind of wrestled with a little bit. Since our CIP fund is basically it's a wash, it's a revolving fund. Expenditures are made out of there, but it has no revenues of its own. Just incidentally, or just as a side note, it doesn't have to be that way. If there are particularly large or complex capital projects, those can be in their own funds, especially if they have their own funding sources, grants or loans, what have you. But they don't have to be, and we've used it as sort of a revolving fund. But the way we've used it is all the expenditures go through Fund 211, the CIP fund, throughout the year. And then it's not till the end of the year that what you were talking about happens, where there's an actual transfer out of the water fund, the sewer fund, the street fund to pay for those projects. So you're right, during the month, you wouldn't
Okay.
see the full picture, or during the year, you wouldn't see the full month-to-month picture.
but in the end, I would see that transfer come in here before, so that would
For,
balance out.
for at the end of the year, yeah,
Okay.
it'll show transfers out,
Okay,
because the Fund 211, it has no money of its own, so
right,
the question comes down to, and I've wrestled with this, and is, do you do that? I mean, you could do those transfers monthly. I mean, you could make it a thing where if you spend money in the capital projects fund, you do the transfer. Because I feel a little funny having a capital projects fund that, I mean, it's got a negative cash balance like you wouldn't believe, because, there's no money coming in, it's all money going out. So the other way to do it would be just a monthly transfer, and this is kind of what I'm used to, but there's a lot, I try not to do everything just the way I've always done it, but there's a lot of ways to do things. But in that way, if you were looking in the water fund, sewer fund, street fund, parks fund, whoever has a capital project, there'd be a transfer out, to the capital projects fund line. It would show the money that is going out, that might have some value to it. So we're kind of thinking through that, but it will end up in the final December report, because those funds have to eventually pay for capital projects fund, since that fund has to zero out.
So if there were monthly transfers, like the park fund, we're looking at page 28, right? Just, if there were monthly transfers, would there then be I'm sorry, not park fund, capital, page 29. Would there then be a revenue section for the capital projects fund?
Yeah, you could do it that way. There'd be, it would just be transfers in, it'd be one line, or unless you broke it out to transfers in from each of the different funds, but there would basically be just transfers in. And in each of the funds that had a capital project, there'd be a transfer out to the capital projects fund. So, yeah, it'd be like again, transfer in is not technically a revenue, but it's a revenue like thing. So there would be a section for transfers in. And then, in a perfect world, that fund would zero out
being at zero.
every month. Yeah, because that's all it is. It's a revolving fund. It's just, and it's a good way to do it because you can see in one place, here's all the capital
Mhm.
projects. So from a practical standpoint, it's a good way to look at it. But from an accounting standpoint, it kind of just, it's spending money, spending money, spending money. You know, you never see it. And then at the end of the year in December, we do all of our year-end stuff. And then the transfer happens and it cleans it up. That's why we've been doing it. And for 2023, that's how we'll have to do it because we haven't done it. But, you know, we're always kind of thinking, is there a better way? So,
I think to your point, then all of a sudden, now we've got a $4 million change. And we don't know what it is, the monthly,
and at
it
least,
helps with
Yeah.
the cap base.
at least you'd see in the month that it was happening and where that amount was.
It'd be nice just for residents to be able to see the bottom line for each fund when it's spent monthly. I think that would be easier to understand than having to explain, well, it's not, we don't have 10 million because we spent it in CIP, you know?
Yeah, that's why we've been batting around the idea of it is more entries at the end of the month or Janice. But it can be a pretty routine one, because, you know, we got that month's expenditures in the capital projects fund. We know which fund funds each of these projects, so it wouldn't be a terribly difficult thing to do, so. And we can talk about that.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth a discussion.
I think
Okay.
there's a misspelling on that page.
Oh,
Hate to read that.
You're that person. On which page?
Now it just stands out for me now that I saw it. Page 29. Right in the middle is lightning protection.
believe it or not, there's a lot of debate about that, because I,
I'm in Google.
One British, one American or something?
I've never seen a debate on that.
so I have to actually ask Bob about that, because I've asked that same question before. It's like, there's a difference between lightning protection and lightning protection.
Oh.
Yeah.
But there very well could.
I was thinking it's like.
Oh, no. Lightening says a drop in the level of the uterus during the last 2 weeks of pregnancy. Lightening, you're lightening the load, but I think Bob probably would have taken out that. Like,
Yeah, the definition is becoming more light.
There you go.
We're taking some weight off the water plant, guys.
Okay. So, yeah, I remember asking you about this before, and I remember thinking, okay, it's not actually lightning protection, it is lightening, but I didn't really get a good.
Let me just
Make lighter.
Oh, lighter.
it's a noun. And a verb.
Right, on
Okay.
that.
I will,
Any other
I will
comments?
answer that question, we'll find out.
Most important.
we will follow up on that immediately.
Any other comments, questions? All right, we'll go ahead and move into our last action item. Which is the response to questions from our last meeting. With Patti and Dawn.
Okay, we can handle this however you want to. I can walk through them. Or if you've had a chance to look at them, we can answer questions about them. What's your pleasure?
Are there, I know that there was one email question, that has already been brought up when this came out about that didn't get answered.
Yep.
So we,
Just that. We were trying to catch them all. So thank you for letting us know.
if we can get that one addressed, and then we can also discuss, responses, see if there's further clarification needed on these responses.
I think we sent an email out regarding the economic development, correct? Did that go out today?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
That was a transpose of the two.
Oh,
Yeah, it was $89 and something, and yeah, it was.
The benefits,
It was,
gotcha.
201 instead of 210, and thanks for catching that.
We did, finally, I was able to get a letter from Larimer County that Larimer County received from DOLA, stating that they were withholding those funds for the three lines that were the zero revenues, that was the,
Motor vehicle
Uh-huh.
taxes.
yep. So we hadn't received it, but Larimer County had, so they forwarded the letter to us today. So now we're in the loop, and at least we have a contact that we can work with as we start moving forward, getting those audits completed.
Yeah, they're holding them. We don't lose the funds,
Right.
but we don't get it until the audit's done. And so that's it's about $167,000.
Correct.
It's for the 2022 and 23. The money is from, because we haven't done our 21 audit, but that was due in 22, so.
Yeah, right.
Just 2 years.
Right.
We haven't received.
Do we have an update on the 21 audit?
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Not a great answer.
They did contact me at the end of December, just saying, they were finishing up. They do a lot of school district audit, and so they were finishing up their school district audit. And that we would be, first in line in the new year. I attempted to contact them twice now in this new year so far, and haven't heard back, so, we were apparently first up, but, our new auditors for 2022 are ready to go.
They're very anxious.
But they can't start until we get 21. Oh,
Yeah.
They are so ready. I know.
no.
I mean, we may be able to work out some interim work that they could do, their internal control testing and testing invoices, and there's the interim piece of what they do, but they can't do a trial balance, and they can't do certain things, so I think gotta get that finished up, so.
Have we withheld payment, what recourse do we have against the audit that is?
So we paid them a $5,000 kind of initial amount, out of the 20,000 or so, I think it was, for the whole amount. And that's all they've gotten so far. So they're way, their hours are way over that $5,000, I'm sure, and it's probably over what, because if what they say is true, that they've got it all done except the one issue, the government-wide capital assets, and I've given them some ideas on what to do about that. Then they put a lot of work into it, and I got the trial balance. I got the trial balance back in August, and the trial balance is pretty complete. There's just this one piece that they couldn't finish. So I think they put a lot of work into it. That's why we try to stick with them for 2021. As far as recourse, I don't know. I've never run into
Did
it.
we start finding that? I mean, not finding, but deducting. Is there anything in our contract that protects us?
Not that I know of.
Can our attorney send them a letter? Attorneys are good at.
Yeah,
Yes.
we talked about that avenue. We would like for them to do this on their own.
Since they're so close.
They're so close.
We've been trying not to be too strong on it. Plus it's a little odd. Again, I've never run into it. I've been on both sides of the issue here is about being an auditor and then being audited. And I've never run into a firm that would just let things drop like this, especially so close to the finish line there. And it's just getting into kind of an adversarial position with, the auditor is just kind of odd. So they keep saying there's this one issue left, and I keep trying to get them to just, well, let's wrap up this one issue. It's not a high risk issue. It comes down to, you have your depreciation schedule for your capital assets. So all the enterprise funds one, where all the real big capital assets are, and in the enterprise funds where it matters, those are all fine. But the records that we have for the government-wide capital assets are different from what was in the beginning balances for the last audit 2020. And they were not able to reconcile. I look at them and I was not able to reconcile them either. They say they checked with the previous auditors and weren't able to get any more information. So you know, I've given them some suggestions for how to resolve it, because it's not a high risk issue here, but I just have to get them to engage.
So I might, not to speak on behalf of the committee, but this might be a takeaway for trustee Gator for the board to determine whether or not to engage the town's lawyer. I know if there's been talk that it may be time to do that, then
Yeah.
Especially if you're not hearing from them. We're 3 weeks into this month.
Yeah, they said, again, I did hear from them late December, which I was happy to hear, and it's, you know, we're just finishing up our school district audits and we get to be the first of the year. So, you know, I gave them, you know, week and a half or so, and then I emailed and said, hey, we're ready to go, and then I just emailed again earlier today, because I hadn't heard anything. It's been another week and a half. So,
It might be those daily phone calls again,
yeah,
sadly, I'm sorry.
we're gonna have to ramp back up the daily phone.
we now have a dollar, we're being $167,000 is being withheld.
Yep. There are repercussions. And we have new auditors ready to roll.
Yeah.
Which is.
I
the
know we
big
don't
deal.
want to strong arm a small firm and it's so close, but
Yeah, I can't figure it out because they are so close. I have the trial balance. I mean, it's audited. It's just this one feature that they, that there's, you know, that we can resolve it, but I gotta get them to reengage. And they had some staffing issues, and when you have 2 CPAs in the firm, any staffing issues are major. So, yeah, I think I need to start calling them.
The daily
Yeah,
phone calls.
maybe.
Squeaky wheel.
Maybe today, maybe even 2 times a day.
You
Maybe you
guys,
call and I can call.
You guys-
We'll call.
you guys may talk about it tomorrow. I'll try to talk with the mayor and get kind of his thoughts from the board, because this, I mean, we were expecting this in July.
Yeah,
I mean, before July. Since July, I've been like, it's around the corner and we're 6 months out now from that.
that was one of the first questions I asked, even before I came on board, was, well, how's the 2021 audit going?
Yeah, exactly.
And it was, well, it's nearly done, and it looked like it from there, because they had the trial balance done, and they just, but it's really unusual. So we'll have to ramp up the phone calls
Okay.
and yeah, we're just hoping it didn't have to go legal, but yeah, I'm running out of.
I mean, can one of those 2 phone calls a day come from
Dan.
Dan? I mean, I know it would be expensive for what we pay him, but I'm just, whatever,
You guys-
I'll defer to the board.
You guys talk about it.
Yeah.
I'll talk to the mayor and then we'll
Okay.
connect tomorrow.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
But I agree, it needs to be.
And if you don't get a good response or a response, yeah, I mean, it looks like you are headed toward determination, but
Yeah,
we have enough funds to bring the new firm on board and have them finish, or can they actually finish?
well, I mean, I was hoping to avoid that when we toyed with that idea is should we bring the new firm on for 21, 22, 23? But they were just so close,
Right.
and they just kept saying it was just this one issue, and so. But yeah, I guess we could talk to the new firm and say, you know, hey, we're not. Because if the new firm could get the trial balance, they have to rely on the audit of the other firm. Yeah, so I don't know, it's tricky, but you know, we have to find a different way if we can't get them to finish it up. But I'm trying to take them at their word that they're finishing up and they're ready to go else, but when they don't respond, it's pretty unprofessional, and I just haven't run into it before. So we'll start the phone calls back up again, and that seemed to help last month, so we'll try it again this month.
Maybe you're too nice.
No, he's been really firm with them on the phone. I've heard him. He is really firm with them.
So now it's
So-
good cop, bad cop.
Well, We could do that.
It's-
We could try that. We'll see.
Don't make me have Don pick up the phone.
problem. He's hot.
Well, I mean, I know their perspective. I know it's a small firm. One of the firms I worked in was I was the second of two VP firms. We did a lot of school districts. I mean, I've almost worked for exactly the same kind of firm. So I understand it, but we would never, we would never do what they're doing. So it's really puzzling. But yeah, we may have to.
Yep. We'll talk tomorrow.
Up the
It
ante.
doesn't take a lot to send even a still working email back.
Exactly. That is what we don't understand.
Thank you. I mean, I
Yes.
have to wait a week and a half and send another email because they can't even, even just fill me in on what's going on, then at least we get a side. Need to get a new firm to do 2021 as well.
At this point, even a still working email, I don't think is satisfactory. Like,
No,
we
but
need-
But at least it would be a response that somebody's there.
July, and then,
Again, it's just the drive down, maybe. It's in the tech center. It's fine. Don't make me make Don come down and see you.
as he drives past on his way home.
Yeah, I know. Exactly.
Stop at 25. not that far.
Yeah,
But the
Don't
hours,
tell him that part.
the hours never seem to quite line up. It's,
yeah.
Any other? I know we diverged a little bit there on audit, so going back to the responses, any questions or comments about the responses that we received?
I know a lot of these are my questions, and I just want to say great job. You've answered completely.
It was really easy to go through them with you sending them to us, so that was really helpful. So if you guys have questions, you have no problem looking them up. This was just easy, and then we can just put it in the packet, and that way everybody has the same information.
kind of one last comment, on the last, just so everyone knows, $167,000, a lot of money. We haven't lost it. We'll get it back.
Right.
But the other kind of practical point of it is, in this case, that's the street fund. It has a $5 million fund balance. And so we didn't have to postpone any projects. We didn't have to pull any punches about, oh, we can't do downtown, we can't do this, we can't do that. Because of the 167. And so just so you know, it feels a little better as a practical matter, it didn't delay anything town is doing. But we still take it seriously and we'll get the money.
So I did want to follow up. Nick had asked a question about the internet service, and I just got the response today, so I didn't get a chance to include it. We currently are with Lumen, who had installed the fiber to this building and over to Public Works. We pay a pretty high price for that. Our contract with Public Works ends in August, and then the contract for this building ends in February of 2025. So we've got some time, then we can go back out for bid or, decide who we want to go with. We're kind of stuck with Lumen right now, but wanted to give you that update.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
And the only other thing, which is not on here, it's okay, talking about the detailed
Yeah,
ledger.
that was the last part I was gonna move into, because I guess I was curious or confused on their initial request. I thought we were looking for like the report of bills that, and I was like, isn't that thing that used to be in the North 40? I thought that, and which is included in the board of trustee packet, so I think it's a good time to have conversation on it.
Sure, and the report of bills, what's in the detail ledger, the expenditure side of the detail ledger, and what's in the report of bills, there's gonna be a lot of crossover, obviously. The report of bills is just a different way of looking at expenditures, not by account number, it's by vendor and that sort of thing, as opposed to the detail ledger. It's basically, if you have the treasurer's report and want to drill down into a line item in the treasurer's report, that's what the detail ledger would do for. So Janice worked real hard last month with Cassell, because surprisingly, again, this was a surprise to me actually, is they didn't have a standard report like that. I used to other applications I've worked with, you could do that. But it can be run. So she worked with Cassell to get the parameters in there. There's some tweaks that we'd like to do to it. I kind of didn't have a transaction date column. I kind of like, that seems like a pretty basic piece of information. What's the transaction date? So we kind of like to have that And then, of course, the other thing in there is that, in the trickier piece, well, transaction date, I mean, we know what month, because it's for that month,
Right.
but transaction date seems pretty fundamental, but.
Yeah.
The other piece, though, is some of the detail, is redacted because it just seemed, I don't know whether it's considered a legal thing or whether it's just a
Confidential.
comfort level thing. It's a
Yeah.
confidential thing about, what people are paying on the utility bills
No, that-
or court cases.
Yeah, it's like active as court. I did not do utilities.
Okay, just,
That would have taken me forever.
okay.
So
Just leave that out of the report. That one's, I don't think necessary.
What, the
utilities.
utility?
No, the,
Or-
the one that you redacted that
well-
takes so long, just leave it
No,
out.
that did not, that does not take a whole lot of time.
Oh.
It would have been if I'd had to redact utilities, that would have taken a long
Okay.
time, all the different accounts. But for court, they will be entering in the revenues by case number moving forward. So that way we don't have to worry about redacting any information related to court.
That works.
My concern is our utilities payments and everybody's names out there for the whole world to see and how much they pay on their utility bills. It's a comfort level for me. I know it's public information, but is it just
it
because it's
revenue?
just,
You talking about revenue?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so just because it's public, is it the right information to put out? So, we're checking with our utilities group to see if we can enter their revenues by account number or by address. So their name is not identified in the report, because if we're presenting the report to you all, it should be in the packet, which would make it a public document. So,
I have an update on
Okay,
that.
perfect.
So when the payments are made through express bill pay, I confirmed with Jeremy, the customer is how they identify the account, not just with
Okay.
the account number, but by customer. So all of that gets imported into Cassell. So with that step, we can't do anything about it. Is there still a step I can do in Cassell? I'm working on that answer, but as far as Jeremy goes on his side,
okay,
there's not much he
Express
can
bill pay.
do.
Okay. Okay, we're
So I
working on
still
it.
have to modify the.
The express is going away, right?
Express bill pay?
Yeah, I got a notice that said they're not accepting a payment anymore.
What?
Yes, yeah.
That came from us or from them? or
I'll have to
from-
look.
That's news. We've not been told that. I'm wondering, did anybody else who does express bill pay get a notice?
I use it.
I have automatic payments that will do that.
Yeah, I haven't checked.
As I actually searched my name and didn't see my name in this report.
You didn't pay?
Well,
So I
Well, about a month ago, it turned out my toilet was running and I
Oh,
got
no.
a bill. Like,
Oh, no. No, it's running.
Yeah, I just did a control F and didn't find where David in here.
yeah, I wonder if it came out, depending on how it's listed. I don't know. I did not go through searching for anyone's name,
Fair.
but that's something we can try to work on internally if we cannot. I don't want to take. I can't afford to take a lot of staff time to redact
Right.
all the information, things like that. So we can see what we can do. If we can't come up with a fix, then, I don't know.
Honestly, I just want the detailed expenses. You can leave
I
the
was
revenue.
gonna
So is
say,
that what you
if
want? Is
I-
the
Yeah.
detailed expenses? That would make it
From the
simple.
board
Got it.
perspective, I don't think really, the thought process for the finance committee is it's having a second set of eyes to see, what are things that we missed. The revenue stuff is gonna be caught at a high level, right? Looking at the summary, you're gonna be like, hey, we're missing revenues here.
Okay.
You don't necessarily need to see detailed revenues. I mean, if we get to the point where we feel like that,
Okay.
but
Got
that's probably the easy way, is just remove the revenues and just keep it expensive.
You have just.
Make sure it's part of
Yeah.
that.
Down on the volume.
Nothing to redact, yeah, because we're not gonna redact anything.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, so that's from the board, because again, really, the idea from the board perspective, which is why we created the finance committee, is to help with finding things, right? We transpose a number here. Because what we don't want to have happen is a resident comes to us and says, hey, you guys are, doing something illegitimate with my tax dollars. And look here, I looked at your reports and they're wrong. What we want is you guys who are looking at saying, hey, by the way, you missed this, and hey, this is an accident, so that we can fix it before it ever goes to a member of the public who's going to come to us angry about it. It's just, again, and that's really more on the expenses side. People are getting mad at the town because this money got collected, but they're mad about how we're spending their money. And so that's really where I think that we wanted that oversight from a board perspective, is just being able to double check and catch anything that might have been missed on the expenses side.
And
So
and
we
I
can-
appreciate that. That was kind of where, I think I said it in the email today,
Yeah.
was, do we need guidance from the board on what we should be looking at? And I
Yep,
agree. it's
yeah.
the
I would say the
expenditures.
expenditures are the ones that, which you guys have been doing exactly what we're looking for. Is the goal that I have from that standpoint is it's that, Janice can read a report 10 times, Don can read a report 10 times, and you're gonna miss something.
Mhm.
But you'll read it the first time and you're like, oh, this is off. And it's not that, it's just your brain starts to see things, your brain's like, oh, it's all good.
Well, you see that, like,
Yeah.
Broken out by person, they're just a bulk number.
hmm,
So it must be, it's building, inspection fees has names on it.
Yeah, so I just say just remove the revenues. I'm confident the board's not gonna be like, no, we need them to review the detailed revenues.
Okay, well,
So that
that
might
fixes that.
solve things, make that easy.
Yeah, but now you'll have the report of bills is one way of looking at the expenditures, and the detailed ledger,
so that's what.
backs up the treasurer's report.
Yeah.
Business legs.
Makes it easy.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was very helpful. Thank
There we
you.
go.
And so if there was a public information request, then that's a different consideration.
Mhm.
And
Yes.
we go through legal review and that sort of thing to determine
Right.
what
Yeah.
needs to be provided.
Yeah.
Exactly.
This
So-
is just because it's informational.
Yeah.
you
Yes.
don't need to make
Yeah,
it-
so if someone wanted to core request the detailed revenues, so that's the whole thing. The town finances are open to the public. Now, what it does is it says, okay, hey, we can redact names out there because it's private information. So there are certain things within Cora. But I would, at that point, if that was core requested, obviously that's going to be provided.
Yeah, that's.
But in
And
terms
they
of
pay
what
for
we're
the time
looking.
that it takes to do it.
Correct, yes,
Yeah.
if it's gonna take 2 hours of staff time to redact the names off that, then they would need to pay the rate for that. But from what the board is looking at from the finance committee. It's really more on the expenditure side, that we just wanna make sure that we're keeping a handle on that, because. Again, really the whole thing is we're trying to. I think we've worked really hard over the last, I've only been involved for 4 years, so I say 4 years, but to really overcome what there were some perceptions of people in the past, the town is doing things underhanded or they're not doing. And we're trying to overcome that, right? And say, hey, look, we're doing good things, we're catching mistakes, we're trying to make things better, we're trying to correct. We're trying, and that's a large part of it is reviewing, hey, here's how we're doing things. And it's like, hey, yeah, everyone makes mistakes. But we try to catch them and fix them as fast as we possibly can. So.
Great. Any other questions on the detail ledger? Or that discussion?
If they have a plan.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Jason for bringing to light those three things, because that was great. That's why we have a finance committee to help us. So
Thanks.
thank you.
I know for my school program that I'm in, I turned in a paper last April. And the next day, on the first page, there was a misspelling. Like, I've worked on this thing months and months. It's the day after I turned it in, I'm like, damn it. So it is that second review, third review.
Yeah.
Review of 7 of us.
It wasn't lightning, was it?
Seeing no more action items, we'll move into reports and start off with staff. Anything from staff?
I do not. No report. Think everything was in the packet. So thank you.
Committee reports. Anyone have anything? Only report I have is that it was brought to my attention, thank you, Pat, that I've not been closing meetings within Robert's rules. So I have asked for a motion and then we've moved on. There hasn't been a second. The other option is that I can just adjourn the meeting.
Oh, okay.
So
Chair's discretion. Yeah.
seeing no other committee reports, I'm gonna practice this.
Like a board report?
Oh.
Oh, man. No, the only thing that I actually wanted to share with you guys, one, I appreciate the work you guys are doing. I've heard from several of the trustees. They really appreciate that you guys are going through and working with that. Again, that was kind of the goal. How can we've known that finance has been a challenging issue for the town over the years, and it's like you guys bring a great level of experience just to help staff And that's again, it's not designed to be, it's to help staff, right? We all want good reports, good information going to the trustees, going to the public, and we really appreciate you guys being willing to be part of that. We have elections coming up in April, and then following that in June, we do reappoint to the finance committee. It's our one committee that's always in 2 years, so I hope you will all consider reapplying. But you guys have done a fantastic job. So, and this is a new thing to Wellington, and you guys have helped make it, in my mind, a huge success. So I appreciate all of you doing work on that. That's all I got.
Can we add board?
Yep, I will. I just made myself a note.
Because I,
Yep.
I seen that if.
I can add that. I can add it to the template.
Any other reports, comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none at 7:07 PM, I will adjourn the committee meeting. Thank you, everyone. Happy New Year.
Good to know.